Australia has a very, very good relationship with Malaysia. It's a relationship that goes back a long way. Last year, we commemorated the 60th anniversary of our diplomatic presence in Malaysia. Those of you who know your history, of course, trace that back to 2 years before the independence of the Federation of Malaya, and of course 7 years before the formation of the Federation of Malaysia. And we commemorated this 60th anniversary because we think it makes a statement about just how long Australia and Malaysia have been partners. The relationship, though, in fact, is one that goes back before even that opening of our first diplomatic mission. Australian Defence Force personnel served in the Peninsula and served in Borneo in the Second World War and served again here during the emergency and during confrontation. And our defence cooperation, which goes back to that period, continues today. Today we have very, very strong defence and security cooperation. It's a relationship in which we see our Defence Force personnel training together. We see them exercising together. Malaysian Armed Forces elements will conduct training in Australia, and our Defence Forces engage in bilateral training, and we also have multilateral training through the 5 Power Defence arrangements headquartered in Butterworth Air Force Base. We were able to work very closely, our militaries were able to work very closely together in the initial period in the search for MH370 over 2 years ago now. We worked together very well in addressing some of the contemporary security challenges we face, including in the fight against terrorism and in the battle against other forms of transnational crime, things like narcotics and other forms. So it's military cooperation, it's also security cooperation through our police and other security agencies. Education, of course, has always been a very strong connecting thread between Australia and Malaysia, and it's been a very strong connecting thread between Australia and Sarawak. Many Sarawakians, including your governor, including your chief minister, were Colombo Plan scholars in Australia, among many thousands of Malaysians who benefited from a university education in Australia under the Colombo Plan. And even today, those education ties continue to be very, very strong. This year we have 24,000 Malaysians enrolled in Australian universities. Of course, there are 3 Australian university campuses in Malaysia, Monash University in Kuala Lumpur, and of course your very own Swinburne University here in Kuching, and Curtin University, which has a campus in Miri. And the support that we've had, that Australia has had from the Sarawak state government, has been very, very important, a very important part of the success of both Swinburne University here in Kuching and of Curtin University in Miri, and we're very appreciative of the support that the state government continues to provide for that. Across those 3 Australian university campuses here in Malaysia, we have another 15,000 or so students, Malaysian, Australian and other nationalities, studying towards Australian university degrees here in Malaysia. And I think that says reminds us just how important that education relationship is. Over the years, as I said, many Malaysians have benefited from an Australian university education, not just through the Colombo Plan, but over the years since the Colombo Plan finished. The Australian government is very keen to reciprocate the benefits of the Colombo Plan, and 2 years ago introduced a new program called the New Colombo Plan, which some people refer to as the Reverse Colombo Plan. And it's a scholarship program that supports young Australian students, Australian undergraduates, to study in Malaysia and to study in other parts of the Asia-Pacific region, so that they can get the experience of studying in a Malaysian university and the other universities whose countries are part of the scheme, to develop the same kind of understanding about Malaysia and these other countries as Malaysian students have developed an understanding about Australia. They get to know the culture, the history. They get to participate. They get to study at your universities, and it builds people-to-people links which we think are very, very important in taking forward the relationship. Last year, which was the first year that Malaysia was part of the New Colombo Plan, we had about 150 Australian students studying in Malaysia. This year, the second year, we have there are about 270 Australian students participating in Malaysian universities, and we hope that the program will continue to grow and the numbers will increase in future years. It is a university-led program, so the students are able to study at the universities which have developed connections with Australian universities. And we hope, while the number of universities that Australian students have been able to study at so far has been relatively limited, we hope that as those university connections are built, as those linkages are developed, we'll see opportunities for Australian students to study in other universities right across Malaysia. So it's something we're very excited about, and it adds yet another dimension to the education connections between Australia and Malaysia. Trade and economic ties between Australia and Malaysia likewise are very strong. We are top 10 trading partners of each other. Malaysia now is Australia's 8th largest trading partner. We have two-way trade of slightly less than 60 billion ringgit. That was in calendar year 2015. And investment, again, is very strong, with investment in both directions of about 90 billion ringgit. There is more investment from Malaysia into Australia. We're doing what we can. We hope very much to see more Australian investment in Malaysia right across the country. The trade and investment relationship is underpinned by two free trade agreements, the Malaysia-Australia Free Trade Agreement and the ASEAN-Australia-New Zealand Free Trade Agreement. And of course, Australia and Malaysia are both signatories to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which we very much hope will come into force as soon as it's ratified by the US Congress and the other governments, the other parliaments whose countries have signed up to it. That's a process that the TPP is going through the Australian Parliament now, and we hope that will be ratified by Australia before too long. It's already been approved, of course, by the Malaysian Parliament. That's something we very much welcome. Malaysia and Australia are both also negotiating partners in the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, and all of this provides a very strong foundation for further trade and investment growth between the two countries. We think there is a great deal of potential to build on those trade and economic ties. Malaysia is a market that's important for many, many Australian businesses. About 3,800 Australian businesses export to Malaysia. So for many, as well as the big export items, the big value export items, Malaysia is a market that's very, very important for a large number of Australian small and medium enterprises. We think there is a great deal of potential for us to do more, and that's something that we're talking to to the Sarawak business community about. The dinner I mentioned last night, the other meeting we'll be having later today, we'll be using that to explore opportunities for further growth in the trade and investment relationship. Sarawak, of course, has a very strong oil and gas sector. Australia is also one of the world's largest exporters of LNG. We have a lot of expertise in the oil and gas sector. We think there's a lot of potential for collaboration and for cooperation in that sector. Food and agribusiness is another area where we think there is potential for further growth. Those of you will I'm sure know, when you walk around the supermarkets here and on Peninsular Malaysia, many commodities you'll see in the supermarkets come from Australia. Australian meat, Australian dairy, Australian processed foods, cereals, and many other forms of food products are there in the supermarkets. Australia has a fantastic reputation for the quality of its food and agricultural products, very, very clean environment, and that's, we think, always appreciated by discerning Malaysian consumers. Education, of course, is an area where we already have the strong foundation that I've talked about. We think there is a great deal of potential for us to do more. One of the areas of growth in the education relationship, in addition to higher education, is vocational education and training. And as Malaysia develops the skills of its workforce to meet the demands of the global economy, there are many areas in which Australia and Australian vocational education and training providers can work with Malaysian institutions to help to develop those skills, and we think that there's a lot of potential there. Healthcare, seniors living and aged care are also areas where we think there is potential for us to work together. We both have ageing populations. As demographics change, there will always be demand for new ways of supporting our seniors and dealing with some of the healthcare challenges that an ageing population will present. Australia has a very well-established and highly efficient aged care sector, and we think that there's a lot that we can do to work together. So if you put all of that together, you'll see we have the foundations of a very, very strong relationship, a relationship that has many historical elements to it. There's a great deal of warmth and a great deal of friendship between the two countries. We're all familiar with the term 6 degrees of separation. I often say that in Malaysia, between Australia and Malaysia, there are only 2 degrees of separation, because you don't have to talk to too many Malaysians before you start to find Australian connections through education, through migration, through tourism, through business, through all of those areas. Many Malaysians are familiar with Australia. Many Australians are familiar with Malaysia. About 500,000 Australians visited Malaysia last year for tourism and for business, and a little over 300,000 Malaysians visited Australia to visit friends and relatives, for education, for tourism, and for business. So there's a tremendous exchange of people in both directions, and that again adds to the richness of the people-to-people ties. So we're very positive about not just the history of our relationship, but the future that both countries have together.